All right, the next step. First up, make sure if you didn't at the end of the first video that you save what you're doing, Control S, or File, Save Scene. Oh, if you've already saved it, it'll give you this nice yellow warning that says you didn't make any changes. It's like, thank you, but I want it to be, thorough. And just get used to hitting Control S a lot, please. So we need to apply some materials to these so that we can change the color. Now, technically, there is already a material applied to this. Technically, the model itself, the mesh itself, is just what we see here, these wireframes. So when you're modeling, we deal a lot with the wireframe because that's the structure. Then a material gets applied to that model, right? So the model itself is not the gray stuff that you see. The model is stuff you can't see unless a material is applied to it. All right, but how are we going to change this? Well, first we're going to open up a new window. We're going to have a lot of windows in this program, all the windows. Windows, Rendering Editor, Hypershade. And I'm going to do my best to keep both of these things in view at the same time. Nope, that won't work. We need to be able to see more of this. So the Hypershade, let's just make this full screen for now. The Hypershade shows you all the materials that exist. So these are the materials that you have if you had textures or lights or cameras or anything like that as well. Here's your 4 cameras that are already in there that I told you were in there. They're just hidden. But we're going to stick with materials for now. And every file in existence in Maya comes with these 3 default materials. And the one that you're 99.2% of the time going to use is this one, Lambert 1. Lambert is a matte material, so there's no like shiny highlight on it. You can see this one has a highlight. And everything that you put a shader on to begin with, it starts with this one. This one here is attached to all of the planets. So yes, some of you may have already gone to the attribute editor and seen that this is listed here and gone, oh, I can make the sun orange. And you do that and everything turns orange, right? Because they're all attached to the same thing. So we need to make 8 plus a moon plus a sun, 10 different materials to be applied to all of these objects. All right, so you can make one and then apply it, or you can just make them all and then apply them one at a time, which is what I'm going to do. So we need to look here at this create section. There are different types of shaders and they all have different rules for how they render. We are sticking with Lambert for now. When we get to materials, we will go over all of these, but we're going to stick with non-shiny. So when we click it, single click it, it creates a new one. It says Lambert 2. And there's a whole bunch of information in here that shows up. Don't worry about that. Again, that is a thing we'll deal with later. But it shows you a view of what that material would look like on something more complex than a sphere, right? Because this does not tell you anything. This is something with a whole bunch of nooks and crannies and a light shining on it. So it can kind of give you a little bit more of a sense of what's going on. So I click on Lambert 2. But I'm going to call it Sun Shader, right? Because we want everything to be named properly. I can't name it Sun. The sun is already named Sun. See here? Can't have 2 things with the same name. If I tried to do that with a material, it would just yell at me and put a 1 afterwards or something like that, right? So call it Sun Shader. And then if I double click here on the color, I can get a color picker. And we can, there we go. And you can see how different that looks from that. So I choose a color, it's pretty orange, hit done. It's not applied to here yet. So we're going to apply this once so we can see how it looks, and then we're going to go through and make them all. There's a lot of different ways to apply a material to a new object. What we're going to do is we're going to right click and hold. Right click and hold the mouse down and very carefully navigate all the way to the bottom. Assign existing material sun shader. Oh, it's yelling at me. Why is it yelling at me? Oh, ugh. It needs to be selected first. It needs to be all green and highlighted. There we go. Sun shader. There it is. And now you'll notice that this preview here is wildly different than what we see here. And what we see here is a little different than what we see here, but this is closer. So when you're choosing these colors, look at this. Right? This is a little closer to what that's going to look like. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to make the rest of these first and then attach them. So I would click on a Lambert. I would call it Mercury Shader. And we're going to make Mercury kind of grayish orange. Mercury is very burnt. Mercury spent too long in the sun and is all cooked. There we go. And then I would just go on to the next one. So if I want to make Venus, I go to here. It's calling it Lambert 4 because it is the fourth one that got made. It's just we still need to rename it. Venus Shader. And double click. There we go. If you single click, you get like kind of a half-baked color picker, which is not ideal. Sort of like a pale yellow. There we go. And so on and so forth like that. And I have, there we go, a list of colors there. You can make them, frankly, whatever you want. I mean, we are dealing with things that are not actually monochromatic and kind of getting the baseline color of what they are. But I'm going to do that off screen. I'm going to make the rest of them. And so you can pause to read this, and then I'll be right back. Alright, so that'll seem like it happened pretty quickly for me because I paused the recorder. But it actually took me a little bit because typing everything, making sure I spelled everything correctly, and then choosing the colors, which I went a little much. So they're going to be pretty bright. One thing you should make sure to do is do not change this Lambert 1. Everything that comes in that you start to make is going to be this material, which means if you make it fuchsia, then everything you model is going to be fuchsia. And that sounds like a good idea until your eyes hurt because you're looking at something that's very, very bright and you can't see the material. If you mess up and accidentally change something, basically all these things are turned down. Colors is at 50% and it's fully gray. It's a 100% like grayscale thing. What the heck? There we go. Right? So there's no color. Half turned up this way, not very dark. So, when you make the moon, which is basically a Lambert, basic gray Lambert, don't use the one that's here. Make one that is actually for the moon. But once you make them all, we can actually close this. Now we can close that, and you can go through, right-click, assign new material, Mercury, and they're listed in alphabetical order. Now this works because we only have 8 or 9 things here. If you are ever working with a much larger set of things, you will have to use one of the many other ways of applying a shader, but for just a simple thing like this, right click, apply, there we go. You gotta right click and hold, that's the tricky part. And just be careful you're not accidentally selecting something else. You can drag select 2 different items and apply the new material to both of them. I'm making both parts of Saturn the same color because why not? Let's see, and the last one. There we go. So those are our planets. Like I said, I went a little bright on the colors where I could. But there is actually a little bit more we could do with brightness, just to give you a little bit of a sense of what else happens with materials. We can get to them individually through here. So the Hypershade is for looking at all of the materials at the same time, kind of seeing where they're stored. But you can select an object, be in its attribute editor, and then go to the name here, which is why we called it sun shader or sun material or whatever you call it. So we can see it all at once. And one of the things that we can do is make it a little bit its own light source and make it a little bit shiny because it's the sun. There's a couple different ways we can do that. I want to, yeah, there we go. Ambient color is where something has color and light to it, even if there's no lights in the scene. So it's providing its own light source, basically, which makes sense because it's the sun. So if I turn that ambient color all the way up, it's very, very shiny. There's no shading on it anymore. See how all of these have like that, you know, curve of shadow underneath them, and this does not. If I turn this down halfway, it'll have a little bit of a shadow to it. And the incandescence makes it too fuzzy, too light. All right, there you go. So makes it a little bit different than the rest of them. Yeah, we can't see the shading on it, but you can't see the shading on the sun anyways. It's its own light source. And if you turn things vaguely in this direction, then the sun. Oh no, actually, the shading is on the other side. The lights in here are just default lights going in a particular direction. So I know this doesn't make this look like the sun is lighting these, but that is okay. All right, so all the materials are set up. Everything looks different. If you ever wanted to use this material on something else, you could. They can be applied to multiple things, but that means all of these settings have to be maintained. This is the shader. This is the material. It's not the material for this, right? It's the material for everything. So if I make this sun ambient, like really high ambient color here, I can't then apply it somewhere else and be like, oh, I'm going to turn it down. No, here, if I, existing material, where's the sun? There we go. See how the sun is changing? Right? So this is one of many instances where things are linked, and they're linked in a way that you can't necessarily see. So it makes it look like we are changing this object. We're not. Each of these tabs is a different set of attributes, or maybe a different thing altogether. This first one right here is the thing. It's a transform nodes. This is its shape node. But this is a material. It's a completely different object. It's a completely different item. It's simply attached to this. So something to keep in mind as we go. All right, so all our materials are done. We're going to hit Control S to save. It's going to yell at me about being a student version. I'm going to hit continue, and it should say result, location where it's saved, and then the name of the file. All right, and then the next video we will start to animate them.